Hello and welcome to the Rumble Podcast. I am Margaret Martins, one of the hosts, and with me today is my lovely co-host,
Hello.
Mike.
How's it going, everyone?
And also joining us today is Mr. Oliver, Dr. Oliver, Brad Oliver. Hi, Brad. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here and good to be with everybody who's getting the chance to down and watch this.
Yeah. So you can just start off. You can tell us just a little bit about yourself and what your role is here at PFW.
Sure. I serve as the faculty chair for the Department of Counseling and Graduate Education over in the PFW School of Education. And primarily our department works with individuals that either coming back for a graduate counseling program or they're coming into teaching, having been a career professional. And that's hopefully something we'll talk about today is transition to teaching, which allows professionals who didn't maybe go into teaching the first time who are now thinking about going into that career path. We also work with teachers coming back to become school administrators, and we have a pretty robust special education program on top of that.
You mentioned transition to teaching. Why don't we just start there, and you can tell us a little bit about what that is and what we offer here at PFW as far as that program.
Sure. So that's a new program for us. We just got approval, and we launched our first cohorts of transition to teaching last year. The state of Indiana, as I'm sure you guys are aware, is struggling to find teachers right now. We're going through a pretty intense teacher shortage, and to quote one local school superintendent, while we'll always have our 4-year traditional program for high school graduates to come and learn to be a teacher, it's so bad we can't afford to wait 4 years. And so the state of Indiana has created the ability to allow career professionals, these are folks that already hold a bachelor's degree, to come back to the School of Education and take graduate level courses, learning the art and science of teaching. And essentially they can get through in about 1 year's time. And there's some additional benefits with the program, and that is that while they're actually going through and taking their graduate coursework, they can apply to the state and actually earn a teaching permit so that they can actually work in a classroom even while they're finishing up the core coursework and to get ready to take the teacher exams and actually become a licensed teacher.
Wow.
And so that's why they call it transition to teaching.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And I should mention we have 3 of those. I always forget to do that because I always say transition to teaching, but it's been a real excellent program in the sense that we're able to offer an elementary pathway which covers kindergarten through grade 6. So if we have a career professional that wants to work with younger children, if somebody prefers middle school, high school, there's a grade 5-12 track that will let them teach a subject area, and it has to be aligned to what they got their bachelor's degree in. But even with that, there's some flexibility around if they can pass a content exam and show that they know their subject matter in another discipline, they can do that. And then the big one, because this is a high need area right now, is special education. And we're one of there's not a lot of those programs out there right now. That it is growing, but that program would allow a career professional who wants to work with students who have already been identified as having special needs to come back through. It's a 24 credit hour program, so it takes a little longer than a year, but in about 18 months they could go through and they would be licensed preschool through grade 12 to actually work with kids that are either cognitively disabled or maybe they have just a simple learning disability, but they have some form of mild or moderate intervention need.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the teacher shortage. So tell us a little bit about that. Why do you think there is a teacher shortage? Why is it worse than ever now?
It's been a problem for a while, but I would say the last 10 to 15 years, it has really become a problem, and in the last 5 years, and it's a perfect storm. So I tell people the 3 reasons I'm going to give you, I'll start with P. I didn't plan it that way, but the letter P. But the first one is a perception problem, and that is we're struggling to get young people excited about going into teaching, which is really unfortunate. And part of that's because we've had a lot of policy changes that has made it very difficult for younger teachers to get established in life, and those policy positions that have contributed to a negative perception of teaching also center around another P, which is pay.
Yep.
And we lag behind most other states. We are making some efforts in Indiana to improve teacher pay, and certainly here in the Northeast Indiana region, there's a lot of work going on to try and get beginning teacher pay up. But we are we are still, we were about 46th out of 50 states, and we're somewhere in the low or in the high 30s right now. So we've got a lot more work to do to get there. We're not going to get there overnight. Part of that's because over the last several years, when a lot of states were putting more money into teacher education pay, we were not. And so we not only fell behind, but you factor in inflation right now. And so the impact is that a young teacher who's going from year 1 to year 2 to year 3 is hoping to get a small bump in pay. They're also facing higher prices and things like insurance and other costs of living. And then I've mentioned 3 Ps. I have to say this, and I know everybody gets tired of hearing this word, but the pandemic really absolutely played into the teacher shortage. It introduced new stresses that teachers hadn't experienced before, trying to teach a virtual. I mean, I teach virtually, but I have adults that are coming to class. I can't imagine being a kindergarten teacher and trying to figure out how you're going to run a 6-hour day in a virtual environment all day. But it took its toll, and there was a lot of great teachers who, after they got through that, that was kind of the straw that broke the back of this thing, and many of them have opted to pursue other career opportunities.
Yeah. So with this teacher shortage and the different difficulties, why should people become teachers? What's the draw? How do you bring students in?
That's a great question. And I have to tell you, so this ties in a little bit at my own personal reason why I went into teaching. When I was 11 years old, my dad was diagnosed with a disease, and unfortunately, he didn't see a pathway forward, and he took his own life. And that really set me back at 11 years of age to lose a parent like that through suicide. I really struggled in the 4 years, my middle school and high school. I was a much different person than I am now, and I was not a person who you'd want to be around. I had a lot of unresolved anger and frustration, and my mom, who I had 3 other siblings at home at that time, my mom was trying to figure out how to help all of us while she was also grieving the loss of her husband. And I share that to say, I was taken to counselors and therapists and the pastor at the church, and lo and behold, 4 years later, it was actually a teacher who actually helped me turn it around. And the influence of a teacher on my life, someone who actually was not directly, had been my classroom teacher, but started to cultivate a relationship with me, actually was an industrial arts teacher, which was really great. And it gave me an opportunity to kind of go down to the shop and just kind of hang out. And he always, at first, I thought he was picking on me because my initials, Brad Oliver, is B.O. And he always called me B.O. Yeah, you don't want to have the initials B.O. But his name was Mike Murray, and so I got permission to call him Eminem. And so we kind of we had code names. It was great, So he was Eminem, I was B.O., and that began a relationship. But I share that with you, to answer your question, Margaret, about why should people go into teaching. When I finished high school and I was thinking about what did I want to do, I couldn't help but think about the influence that person had on my life, because I was in a really bad spot. I seriously was starting to have my own ideation around maybe my dad had it right. And I know this sounds terrible to say, but that's just the truth of where I was at 16. But by the time I graduated, I was in a very different place. And now I'm thinking about, okay, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? And I thought, man, I want to be a teacher like Eminem. And that's what I did. And I've been 33 years at it. And so when I get a chance to actively talk to either somebody who's about to graduate from high school is thinking about teaching, and now in my new role, I'm talking with career professionals every day who've said to me, I always thought about being a teacher, but I didn't do it. I became a scientist, or I went into mathematics and became a banker, or maybe they went into some other life calling, but they always had something inside of them because they had a passion for kids or for mentoring a young person. And so it's always a delight for me to share that story and to see something good that's come out of that, so many years later. That was 40 years ago now, more than 40 years now. But to see people who are wanting to enter the profession, and I will tell you this, even with all the perception challenges and the pay problems and the pandemic, I still think it's one of the greatest professions, especially if you really understand that, yes, part of it is about teaching kids knowledge and helping them get ahead in life. but it's a relationship profession. It's a place where we get to create these incredible connections with kids and to experience the relationship and the love of a child and a teacher, especially when they connect. It's so awesome because you just see their lives take off. So I will tell that story every single time and try. I'm absolutely interested in trying to find teachers, and so I spend a good chunk of my work week not only teaching and helping to administer graduate education programs here at the university, but I spent a lot of my time just talking to people about why should they go into teaching and answering that very question. So, so I hope I do a good job on them.
I think you do. I think you do.
And I should say that doesn't mean I don't go after the young people too. There may or may not be video of me running around on the science squad, running up to freshmen on freshman day, going, we need teachers. Yes, we do. We need teachers. How about you?
Oh my goodness.
They look at me like I'm crazy, but it gets me into like a 3-minute conversation with them about teaching. So
Good starter. Yeah.
So that's exactly right. So even though I'm not over teacher education, the traditional undergraduate, I recruit for them too. So we need great people to go into teaching.
Well, you told us a little bit about transition to teaching. What other programs are you over?
Yeah, so something that's really interesting about in terms of a bridge between transition to teaching, and this plays into how we approached our transition to teaching, because the other thing that I think, we talked about pay being one of the issues, and when we designed our transition to teaching program, something I believe we did really, really smart is we thought about how could we embed the coursework in such a way that if somebody wanted to come back to the university, career professional, and let's say they have to take 6 graduate courses. Well, you only need 10 for a master's degree. So we figured out a way to embed that coursework so that those folks have an opportunity to come back and actually apply that transition to teaching work to a master's, because we've traditionally had masters of education degrees for elementary education, science education, special ed, and we still do.
Right.
And that has proven to be a very good idea for a couple reasons. One is that we get some teachers coming back who want to just add the master's degree. So you've got in-service educators in these classes. You've also got career professionals who are deciding late in life to go into teaching, and so they're mixing in with that. But here's the good news for both of them. I mentioned pay. One of the things that happened from a policy position several years ago, there was a period of time in Indiana where the prevailing belief is that a master's degree doesn't make you any better of a teacher. And so there was actually some state laws changed that actually removed what we call pay differential. So in districts where a teacher with a master's degree might have made $4,000 or $5,000 more because they held a higher degree, that went away. And when that went away, a lot of teachers went away. Mm-hmm. So what has happened is that the legislature has now realized that was a mistake. And they have now allowed school districts in a very and it really depends on the school district, but rather than having just a wholesale change in terms of how they pay teachers, they have allowed them to use master's pay as a way to attract teachers, particularly into what we call high need positions where there are deeper shortages, like special education and elementary education. A lot of people don't even realize this. Elementary education is like the number one teacher shortage area right now, and that just seems hard to believe.
We had a fun fact that the Indiana Department of Workforce Development reports that elementary school teaching is the second fastest growing occupation in Indiana.
Special education is number 2. And when I say shortage, so, last year when we started school in August, we still had almost 2,000 open teaching positions. This year when school started, we had almost 1,500 open teaching positions. Now, those are statewide numbers, but Mark Daniel, who's a superintendent here at Fort Wayne Community Schools, is a good friend. And in talking with the superintendent there in Fort Wayne, even when they started this year, he still was struggling. He had more than 50 positions still open, trying to fill those, largely elementary, special education, some targeted areas and secondary where there's areas of math and science of that nature. But the reason I share that is that going back to pay for a second, a master's degree in a number of growing districts now means pay differential. And so I share that because one of the things that we are proactively promoting in the School of Education is that not only do we think that transition to teaching is a necessity, we see as an opportunity to help springboard people into a master's program so that, if you're going to teach for, say, 20 years and, there's pay differential and you might make $4,000 or $5,000 more in your base salary, well, you can do the math on that over 20 years. Why would you do the same amount of work and leave $100,000 on the table? So it's been a very a positive thing for us. We've seen our growth up about 36% in those programs, and obviously transition to teaching is a feeder program into those. But I think the greatest thing I'm most excited about is seeing the impact of those candidates out in the schools, because you have to keep in mind with transition to teaching, about 80% of these new students, and we have roughly about 80 transition to teaching students, about 80 to 90% of them, because they can get a permit and start teaching immediately.
Yeah.
They're not having to finish all the coursework before they can start teaching. About 80, 90% of them are teaching while they're going through the classes. So it's a win-win, because the school districts are getting them in the classrooms and they're getting immediate experience, and they're still getting to work with scholars here at the university and a number of practitioners in the field. So we're really excited about the direction that's headed, and I think you'll see us continue to make some inroads and trying to address the teacher shortage in Indiana, at least in Northeast Indiana, through those programs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it seems like you're doing a really great job helping to improve that shortage.
I hope so. It can be challenging at times. One of the things that we've tried to do is we've tried to really keep the needs of the adult learner in our mind in the School of Education. And so right now that program's about 75% online, 25% on site. But even when it's on site, those classes are usually late in the evening, so 6:30 to 8:45, and they're usually targeted at courses like a methodology class or a reading class, where you really need a little more time with somebody from the university on how to really break that kind of content down so that you can do it in the classroom well.
Absolutely. I was going to say that's great that they have the flexibility for people that are in between jobs or, going to school and working at the same time. They could just work from home and they could go to school online and they could learn how to be a teacher, and even when it comes down to it, just taking a few courses here and there, they'll eventually get there.
Yeah.
So it's perfect.
Yeah, it is something that, like I said, is meeting a need. Something really interesting too. This that may be of interest to folks out there, and we're certainly watching it. We've tried to be proactive too in trying to find solutions to this teacher shortage problem. So this past year, I mentioned Mark Daniels, who's the superintendent for Fort Wayne Community Schools. We have myself and a couple of my colleagues from the School of Education have been meeting with Fort Wayne Community Schools and some of the other superintendents. Marilyn Hissong, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Marilyn, who's the superintendent of East Allen County. But we put our heads together. There's been a traditional 4-year scholarship program to try and attract more high school graduates in the teaching called the Next Generation Hoosier Educator Scholarship Program. And I've had an idea for a long time about expanding that program at the state level, but it requires a change in the law. So we got together, and I think it was about around November, and we started talking about, could it be possible we could find a lawmaker who would help us put a bill together and actually move it into law. And we were successful. Dave Heine, who's our representative here up in East Allen County, got really excited about the possibility. And what it does is it's moving through right now. It's already passed out of the House of Representatives, but House Bill 1528 is called the Transition to Teaching Bill. And basically, the design of it basically says that if we have a career professional that wants to come through a transition to teaching program, the program would allow for one-time, non-renewable $10,000 scholarships. And that actually would cover the entire cost to send one individual back through the entire program. So the reason why the legislature is looking at it is because in the current program, it only serves high school graduates that want to come through a 4-year program, and it gives them $7,500 every year for up to 4 years.
Okay.
So if you think about that, $7,500 over 4 years is $30,000. Yeah. We're only asking for a one-time grant for $10,000. It's going to take 4 years to put a pre-service teacher through. We can get them through in about 1 year to 18 months. So there's not a lot of legislation that passes in Indianapolis by both parties. So you guys know how political things get down there. That passed out of the House of Education 92-0. That never happens.
Wow, that's a huge
win.
deal.
It just passed out of the Senate Education Committee, and it's now going before the full Senate. And we're hopeful it'll be a part of the budget. It's a budget year. And if that happens and Governor Holcomb would sign that into law sometime after July 1st, we may have some big announcements about how not only can we provide a pathway for people interested in teaching, but there actually would be a mechanism through the Next Generation Hoosier Educator Scholarship Program. So really appreciate Marilyn Hissong, like I said, Superintendent Hissong, Superintendent Daniels, Representative Dave Heine, and even my colleague, Dr. Phil Downs up at Trine has weighed in on that. But working together with area school leaders and with elected officials, we're really hopeful that's going to pass.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
there's a little bit of breaking news there. So
No,
we'll see if that plays out.
That's
but
really
it
exciting.
looks
I
real
feel like
good.
that opens up opportunities for a whole lot of other people in a way that there wasn't before.
It will, and it's one of those things too, where for a lot of working adults, and you guys know this, you're working adults yourself.
Right.
You're if you're like anybody else, you're trying to figure out. Always seems to be more month than margin in your budget, right? So a lot of people are like, well, why should we provide assistance? Well, number one, it's probably one of the greatest public services as a state we provide. Is every child in the state is entitled to a free education. I mean, that's amazing to think about that. But trying to incentivize working adults who have children, who have expenses, who have needs to say, yeah, why don't you take $10,000 out of your pocket, come back and retrain yourself to go in. It can be really, really tough. And to be honest with you, since we're not up to where we should be with state teacher pay, as we've shared and we've testified on this publicly with the lawmakers, it's actually a small drop in the bucket. $10,000 sounds like a lot of money, but to the state of Indiana, when you look at its total budget, we spend, and I'm not kidding, we spend $18 billion on education, on K-12 education in the state. So, throwing some grants out there to try and incentivize people.
10K is nothing.
And I'm so glad. I think they have seen that, and so I just raise that because we need more of that kind of thing, and that's an outgrowth of partnership between university academics who understand how to prepare teachers, but also then working with practitioners in the field who are the ones actually hire them, and us coming together and then mixing into that some lawmakers that actually listened and were open to carrying that bill forward. So yeah, it's a really good one.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's amazing that it's moving forward that fast. That's fantastic.
We'll see. The session will be over with, I believe they're due to be over with the first part of April. So everybody's always delighted to see them go home. I'm not going to lie. Right. I appreciate their service, but it gets really interesting. It's been another really rough session down there. But I'm hoping that there'll be some good news coming out of this session on that bill, on House Bill 1528, if you want to keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
That's great.
So
that's wonderful to know. So you mentioned some of these, but are there any other accommodations you can think of? I mean, obviously, this would be a huge win for working adults, non-traditional students. So are there any other accommodations that you offer for non-traditional students?
Yeah, I think the thing we're looking at right now is there's a large group of what we call paraprofessionals out in schools right now. And
I was one of those.
And these are folks that don't have a bachelor's degree yet, but they have some college credits, but they're working, and they may be an instructional assistant, they may be a special education assistant, and we're studying it. It gets a little harder to figure that one out because in the course of a preparation program, it isn't just the pedagogical classes. In some instances, they still need gen eds, general education coursework. But we're looking at it, and that's one that my colleague, Dr. Luke Rodeseiler, and our dean, Isabel Nunez, is going to take some other eyes on that too, because that's more undergraduate, but these are adult learners. And how do you design it in such a way that allows them to still be in a school? Because you don't want to take them out of the school, right? So how do you leverage online learning or some kind of hybrid model? But I think that's another area that we can certainly look at, and we're studying it. Another one too is where and I don't want to speak for my colleague, but Luke Rodeseiler, who's our chair for the Department of Teacher Education, he and his colleagues and my colleagues, faculty in the School of Education, are looking to work more closely with our content area faculty across the campus. We have a College of Science, we've got a College of Liberal Arts. So, rather than waiting until they're graduated and out in the field working, how do we do a better job of sharing our story about why we went into teaching, and maybe connect with some 19, 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds on campus and say, hey, because we do have a pathway here that will allow someone who is studying, for example, biology, to double major, where they can pick up a secondary education teaching license. And again, they're not committed to going to teaching just because they earned it, but we have the pathway. And so we're certainly trying to do some things to stimulate that because we didn't mention this in the teacher shortage, but one of the things that we're dealing with that every university is dealing with is we're seeing fewer and fewer high school graduates wanting to go into teaching. And so we're trying to turn that phenomenon around a little bit as well. But that's some of the innovation we got going on.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So lots of stuff happening in the School of Education.
Lots of stuff. I didn't even know.
Lots of busy mastodons over there.
Right?
That's amazing, though, that you're communicating with the other departments as well to help, recruit these kids and maybe sway them, be like, hey, do you want to take some courses in education as well to help out, and help you in your professional career as well.
Mike, I'm so glad you said it too. And I'll get myself in trouble if I try to start mentioning names, but something that the School of Education and our colleagues in these other colleges have been doing as well is how do we work more closely together to make sure that in terms of preparation around content even, that work more closely, because one of the very first exams that a future teacher has to pass is a content test that says, I know my subject matter. Yeah. And we don't teach content in the School of Education. We teach pedagogy. We teach people how to teach. So the idea is they've already gone to the College of Science, College of Liberal Arts. They've gotten but we've had some great collaboration the last year to 2 years with our colleagues over there, looking at ways that we can make sure that the next generation of teachers coming out of the School of Education first come out of the College of Science, College of Liberal Arts, even the performing arts, well taught, well prepared in their subject matter, so that by the time they come to the School of Education and they take their pedagogical coursework, either as an undergraduate or as a transition to teaching candidate, they're ready to go into the classroom and make an immediate difference because they know how to teach that subject matter. So I'm actually really glad you said that, because that's one of the things I feel really proud of, is to be part of a university where, and you get this criticism sometimes that colleges and schools are siloed, and that there is some truth in that. But I can also tell you that part of the story that needs to be told is there's a lot of great collaboration going on around the university campus. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
Well, in closing, tell us a little bit about your upcoming education celebration.
Yeah, so it's really exciting. And we've had an Indiana Teacher of the Year program for a number of years, but this particular year, our particular 2023 Teacher of the Year happens to be a high school teacher at Bluffton High School. So cool. Tara Kokenauer, who is a teacher at Bluffton High School, is going to be with us on June the 1st. And right now we are planning on having a reception to not just celebrate Tara, but to celebrate everybody in teaching. It's a great time for us to do it because many of the schools are wrapping up right at that point. It's also the end celebration for an initiative we've had going on all this year called Leverage Your Leadership, which has been about connecting some of our educational leadership graduate students with principals in the field. And that's going to piggyback on the backside of that as a private dinner and some things for them where they get a little bit more time at the State Teacher of the Year. But yeah, we'll have some more information coming out on that. But the plan right now is to have a reception, some music, some great food. Obviously, we want a chance to celebrate Tara and her accomplishments. She'll actually be starting right at that point. She'll be starting her reign as the 2023 Teacher of the Year, meaning she's going to be going out and trying to really raise the profession and raise the profile of the profession about why people should go into teaching. And so we decided, you know what, we're just going to open it up. Who wants to pass up on free food and and live music and a chance for us to love on some teachers? And so any teacher, any classroom teacher, paraprofessional, school administrator, everyone is invited. You'll see some more information going out on the School of Education social media. I'm sure that our good friends in Continuous Studies will help us push that out as well.
Absolutely.
And our friends at the Region 8 Education Service Center, which is the service center that supports the 12 counties in Northeast Indiana and all the school districts, they're already starting to push that out and making teachers aware. It's a great chance for them to come together and celebrate having made it through yet another year of teaching, celebrate the accomplishments of one of our colleagues that happens to be there at Bluffton High School. But it's going to be a fun night. It really is. And it's a chance to just remind ourselves why we made the choice to go into this profession and why we do what we do in terms of classrooms every day. So
and to celebrate it being summer and getting to have a break.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be great.
Yeah, well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here and just telling us about yourself and about the department that you're over. And I just really appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure. I appreciate both of you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Brad.
We'll see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.